Hi, everybody. I'm Jim. This is Great Books, Big Ideas. Continuing on my playlist, walking through the year one Great Books reading program. And we're doing today Alexis de Tocqueville, selections from Democracy in America. And this is a reading that's only in the second edition of the Great Books set, not in the first edition. And the particular chapters we're going to cover today are Volume 1, Part 2, Chapters 6, 7, and 8. So let's get right into it, and we'll give you a little bit about de Tocqueville and what his thoughts are about democracy in America. First of all, this text, as presented here in the Great Books set, was translated by George Lawrence. And I wanted to give you a few biographical tidbits from the little introduction to Tocqueville. Alexis de Tocqueville's dates are 1805 to 1859. And after he stayed in America around 1831, this Frenchman published Democracy in America, his most famous book, I guess. Well, two famous books he wrote. This was one of them. And this was published in two parts. The first part, published in 1835, was about the political structure of the United States. And the second was about the effects of democracy on society. Tocqueville was from Normandy and was, these are interesting tidbits, a descendant of Joan of Arc's brother. Wow. And he was related to the Romantic author Chateaubriand and the great-grandson of Malesherbes, an advisor of Kings Louis XV and Louis XVI. He had some involvement with political affairs in France and was on the committee that wrote the Constitution of the Second Republic. But Louis Napoleon dismissed him soon after. Tocqueville refused an oath of allegiance and was banned from political office as a result. He even spent some time in jail. His other famous book, other than Democracy in America, is The Old Regime and the Revolution, which is about French history. That argued that there was actually a good deal of continuity between the ancient regime and the revolution and what came after. First of all, Chapter 6 is about the real advantages derived by American society from democratic government. And topics covered in this chapter include the tendency of laws within American democracy and the instincts of those who apply those laws. Democracy's vices and long-term advantages are talked about. He says that American democracy is often very clumsy, ham-fisted, but the tendency of its laws is beneficial to the well-being of the greatest number over time. Public officials have no permanent interests differing from the majority's interest. He talks about public spirit in the United States of America, how individual interest is linked intimately with the country's interest. He talks about the idea of rights in the United States. He says nothing is so beautiful as the idea of rights, which is the conception of virtue applied to politics. In America, people have a high idea of political rights because they possess some of those rights themselves, and they have a respect for law. There's a paternal affection they feel for the law, and the personal interest of everybody increases the strength of the law. Also in this chapter, he talks about how the political authority, the political activity in the United States is harder to conceive than the freedom and equality found there. Legislatures behave feverishly, chaotically. Americans find it hard to be occupied with their own business only, and kind of meddling a lot, agitating a lot, and political agitation spills over into the civil society. Ain't that the truth? There are indirect social advantages to democratic government, though. He gets into that. Chapter 7 is maybe my favorite chapter in the selection here. of the three, and that's about the omnipotence of the majority in the United States and its effects. It talks about the natural strength of the majority in democracies. Most of the constitutions in America, and I should add that he's not, most of the time, he's not really talking about the federal government so much as the state governments. So he talks a lot about, the state level and local level of democracy, in addition to the federal. But most of the constitutions in America have artificially boosted this natural strength of the majority by means of pledged delegates. And the majority has moral authority. They have moral power. Is this moral power infallible? No, it isn't, and that's a problem. Omnipotent majority increases legislative and administrative instability. They change their legislators every year or two, and they give them, at the same time, near limitless power while they're in office. And there's a great drive toward social improvements in America, but it's less continuously so than you find in Europe. He's often comparing European governments to American government. And then he gets into the central idea here. This would be another one of our big ideas: tyranny of the majority. Tyranny of the majority. When majority power is unchecked, it leads to the tyranny of the majority. This leaves minorities and dissidents very vulnerable. We should take precautions to moderate the majority's actions, but these have not been taken in the United States of America. I'll quote from page 131 of the text. He says, "What I find most repulsive in America is not the extreme freedom reigning there, but the shortage of guarantees against tyranny." End quote. He talks about the effect of the omnipotence on the arbitrary power of public officials, and he distinguishes arbitrary power from tyranny. And then a very interesting section in this chapter, I'm going to quote some of this for you too. He talks about the power exercised by the majority over thought. Think of it as like the thought police. When the majority makes up its mind, makes decisions, there is no further discussion in America. Democratic republics have turned despotism into something immaterial. And by that, I think he means, like talking about the mental, the idea level of things. There is still the tyranny, the despotism over ideas. I want to quote this long passage on page 133 about this. I'm also going to go back to page 131 because that kind of leads into this other discussion. This is right after the quote about what he's most repulsed by in America. I was a little surprised at how critical de Tocqueville is of America, how willing he is to critique and to frown on and to wag the finger about what's going on in America. It's a mix of praise and blame, which I think is healthy. When a man or a party suffers an injustice in the United States, to whom can he turn? To public opinion? That is what forms the majority. To the legislative body? It represents the majority and obeys it blindly. To the executive power? It is appointed by the majority and serves as its passive instrument. To the police? They are nothing but the majority under arms. A jury? The jury is the majority vested with the right to pronounce judgment. Even the judges in certain states are elected by the majority. So however iniquitous or unreasonable the measure which hurts you, you must submit. Really, no one's on your side, is there? And then this is a footnote. I don't always read the footnotes, but I read this one, and it's a little anecdote. I love examples. Okay. He says, At Baltimore, during the War of 1812, there was a striking example of the excesses to which despotism of the majority may lead. At that time, the war was very popular at Baltimore. A newspaper which came out in strong opposition to it aroused the indignation of the inhabitants. The people assembled, broke the presses, and attacked the house of the editors. An attempt was made to summon the militia, but it did not answer the appeal. Finally, to save the lives of these wretched men threatened by the fury of the public, they were taken to prison like criminals. This precaution was useless. During the night, the people assembled again. The magistrates having failed to bring up the militia, the prison was broken open. One of the journalists was killed on the spot, and the others left for dead. The guilty were brought before a jury and acquitted. I once said to a Pennsylvanian, "Please explain to me why in a state founded by Quakers and renowned for its tolerance, freed Negroes are not allowed to use their rights as citizens. They pay taxes. Is it not right that they should vote?" "Do not insult us," he replied, "by supposing that our legislators would commit an act of such gross injustice and intolerance. So with you, Negroes do have the right to vote?" "Certainly." "Then how was it that at the Electoral College this morning I did not see a single one of them in the meeting?" "That is not the fault of the law," said the American. "It is true that Negroes have the right to be present at elections, but they voluntarily abstain from appearing." "That is extraordinarily modest of them." "Oh, it's not that they are reluctant to go there, but they are afraid that they may be maltreated. With us, it sometimes happens that the law lacks force when the majority does not support it. Now, the majority is filled with the strongest prejudices against Negroes, and the magistrates do not feel strong enough to guarantee the rights granted to them by the lawmakers." "What? The majority privileged to make the law wishes also to have the privilege of disobeying the law?" Interesting stuff. Okay, moving on to page 133. This is the extended passage I wanted to quote. Okay, I'm going to cut in on page 132 on this column here. We'll read over into 133. I thought this resonated with me. Let me know what you think. He says, "I know no country in which, speaking generally, there is less independence of mind and true freedom of discussion than in America. There is no religious or political theory which one cannot preach freely in the constitutional states of Europe, or which does not penetrate into the others. For there is no country in Europe so subject to a single power that he who wishes to speak the truth cannot find support enough to protect him against the consequences of his independence. If he is unlucky enough to live under an absolute government, he often has the people with him. If he lives in a free country, he may at need find shelter behind the royal authority. In democratic countries, the aristocracy may support him, and in other lands, the democracy. But in a democracy organized on the model of the United States, there is only one authority, one source of strength and of success, and nothing outside it. In America, the majority has enclosed thought within a formidable fence. A writer is free inside that area, but woe to the man who goes beyond it. Not that he stands in fear of an auto da fe, but he must face all kinds of unpleasantness and everyday persecution. A career in politics is closed to him, for he has offended the only power that holds the keys. He is denied everything, including renown. Before he goes into print, he believes he has supporters, but he feels that he has them no more once he stands revealed to all. For those who condemn him express their views loudly, while those who think as he does, but without his courage, retreat into silence, as if ashamed of having told the truth. Formerly, tyranny used the clumsy weapons of chains and hangmen. Nowadays, even despotism, though it seemed to have nothing more to learn, has been perfected by civilization. Princes made violence a physical thing, but our contemporary democratic republics have turned it into something as intellectual as a human will it is intended to constrain. Under the absolute government of a single man, despotism, to reach the soul, clumsily struck at the body, and the soul, escaping from such blows, rose gloriously above it. But in democratic republics, that is not at all how tyranny behaves. It leaves the body alone and goes straight for the soul. The master no longer says, "Think like me or you die." He does say, "You are free not to think as I do. You can keep your life and property and all, but from this day, you are a stranger among us. You can keep your privileges in the township, but they will be useless to you. For if you solicit your fellow citizens' votes, they will not give them to you. And if you only ask for their esteem, they will make excuses for refusing that. You will remain among men, but you will lose your rights to count as one. When you approach your fellows, they will shun you as an impure being, and even those who believe in your innocence will abandon you too, lest they in turn be shunned. Go in peace. I have given you your life, but it is a life worse than death." Absolute monarchies brought despotism into dishonor. We must beware lest democratic republics rehabilitate it, and that while they make it more oppressive towards some, they do not rid it of its detestable and degrading character in the eyes of the greatest number. In the proudest nations of the Old World, works were published which faithfully portrayed the vices and absurdities of contemporaries. La Bruyère lived in Louis XIV's palace while he wrote his chapter on the great, and Molière criticized the court in plays acted before the courtiers. But the power which dominates in the United States does not understand being mocked like that. The least reproach offends it, and the slightest sting of truth turns it fierce. And one must praise everything from the turn of its phrases to its most robust virtues. No writer, no matter how famous, can escape from this obligation to sprinkle incense over his fellow citizens. Hence, the majority lives in a state of perpetual self-adoration. Only strangers or experience may be able to bring certain truths to the Americans' attention. We need seek no other reason for the absence of great writers in America so far. Literary genius cannot exist without freedom of the spirit, and there is no freedom of the spirit in America. Yeah. Do you feel seen? Okay, moving on. Chapter 8. This chapter is sort of about checks on the tyranny of the majority, and one is the kind of decentralization of authority and administration. And also he talks about the legal profession, the temper of the American legal profession and how it counterbalances democracy. So lawyers tend to be more aristocratic in their thinking. They value order, they value procedure, and this can put brakes on public excesses. And then finally, he talks about the jury system in America. The jury is considered as a political institution. The effect of the jury system on the national character is also described. It's like citizenship school for the people. They learn to have respect for rights. They learn to take responsibility for their decisions. And the jury system tends to also to establish the magistrate's influence and the spread, and it also contributes to the spread of the spirit of laws. So he has some good things to say about the jury system. Let me now give you 3 discussion topics for consideration. You're always welcome to, you could use these in a book club if you're doing the Tocqueville, or if you want to just comment down below. It's always fun to read your comments. All right, first up, Tocqueville is intrigued by the chaotic energy of American civic life, the constant organizing and agitating and debating and community building. It seems more valuable in his view than the actual efficient performance of the government. Is such restless activity always a good thing? Does it maybe lead to burnout and unending outrage? Do you ever get weary of all this agitation and debate? Where do we draw the line between an energized civic society actively engaged in politics and a hyper-polarized society where nobody is at peace? Food for thought. A second discussion topic to think about. In America, dissidents tend not to be caged or killed. That's like what we were just reading. Instead, the tyranny of the majority uses social isolation, shunning, canceling, ostracizing, and nullification. Sometimes vigilante justice too, like in the case of that newspaper in Baltimore. Does our current digital public sphere, and let's face it, most of our public sphere happens online, does that make us freer to speak our minds today? Do you see that the formidable fence that Tocqueville talked about remains, but does it simply take a new shape online? And then finally, Tocqueville makes tons of observations about American democracy and American social character. It's nearly 200 years now since he wrote this book. Down the road, which observations remain most relevant in your view? Which seem to be out of date? And how much has American democracy and the American character changed since the 1830s? You might be surprised in reading de Tocqueville how much has stayed the same. But there were moments in here where I felt, thinking as a quote, an American, I felt seen. I felt like, yeah, that could be today. We now move on to our next stage. We're getting close to the end of the year 1 plan. Next up is a controversial text. Is going to be a lot of fun to cover, and that is the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And it's going to be fun to compare Marx and Engels to things that Adam Smith was talking about, and John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and like the Federalist, all this stuff seems to be kind of tying together in some interesting ways. Yeah, thanks for joining me on this journey, and I hope you're well, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.